So I'm going to call us to order.
Yeah, perfect.
We have some changed faces, kind of, from the last iteration of the policy.
I was gonna say there's one,
So,
one constant.
And Celeste.
one constant, and
And
Celeste.
Celeste is
Is
with
this your second year, third year?
Depends on when the year started. I feel like I started in October, so maybe going on 3.
Yeah.
I feel like I know what I'm doing, so probably 3.
Celeste was here before I came to policy.
Oh, yeah, so this must be your third year. So I'm coming back to policy, and Janie is joining policy, so we will get started. I'm just gonna jump us right into approval of the November 19th, 2025 policy committee meeting minutes.
One change, because I emailed it in before and then I still had to say it, so I said I'd just wait. And it's just a little teeny typo. The last line on page 3 says provided to do so is consistent with the law instead of provided doing so. Oh, it says, I'm sorry, what it says is provided doing so inconsistent with the law. It should be is instead of in. Minor, last line on page 3.
Okay. There was one other typo under 1.02. It's listed as Mr. Allen.
Oh.
It's really, again, minor, so.
I missed that one.
Is there a motion to approve?
She might disagree with that being minor.
I move to approve with
Yes.
minor corrections
All right.
as needed.
So motion by Ms. Monier,
Second.
second by Ms. Yoho. All those in favor? So the minutes are approved. Next, we'll move to public comment. It does not look like there's any public here, so we will move it right along to policy, to 1.04, policy 505, health education.
So policy 505 health education begins in your agenda packet on page 9. This is the first time policy 505 is coming before the policy committee. It was adopted in February of 2008. So it's been a while since it has last been updated. And staff's recommendation is to take a slightly different approach than we have with most of our other policies. We are not recommending an edit, we are recommending a decommission and start fresh. The changes are just dramatically different over the last 15, 16 years, 18 years since this was since it was adopted. Sufficient to justify, we thought, the decommission and start fresh approach. So I will walk you through the new policy language, and when we get to the questions with me to help provide support, I have Scott Murphy, Dr. Kathy Gall, and Brian Griffith. Mr. Murphy, Dr. Gall are our directors in CII, and Mr. Griffith is, and I wrote it down so I would get it right, the supervisor of health and physical education. They are our subject matter experts for today. So the policy purpose is a very just clean statement that this sets the expectations for a comprehensive health education program. Staff think that there are only 2 definitions that are really required: health education and parent, and the definition for parent is one we are consistently using across our policies. There are 3 policy statements that the board acknowledges its obligation to provide an age-appropriate health education consistent with law and MSDE's framework. A more specific statement in paragraph 2 that kind of builds on paragraph 1, and then a reaffirmation that the board approves essential curriculum, new courses, pilot courses, textbooks, and the family life and human sexuality materials of instruction, and that those materials are made available for review. Within the implementation, the direction is to FCPS is to implement the health curriculum as adopted by the board. It establishes the Family Life Advisory Committee in more detail than what is articulated in Board Policy 101, which is just a simple one line that says there will be a Family Life and Community or Family Life Advisory Committee. And then it allows for opt-out procedures from the health education and directs the superintendent to create a regulation so the community knows how to opt out. And then, of course, we have our related information, which are a bunch of board policies, HOMAR, external resources, regulations, our internal resources, statutes, the whole works. In fact, the related information is almost as long as the policy itself.
I noticed that.
So the recommendation is to approve the decommission and adoption of the new policy 505 as is, and to advance this to the board for first reading.
I have one question and one comment to start. So under policy statement number 2, it says we'll provide comprehensive health education for all students from pre-kindergarten through grade 8. And then the completion of health education consistent with high school graduation. So that second part, that consistent with the high school graduation requirements, referring to like the high school courses? Yes, okay. The way it's written, it just sounds like we only provide comprehensive health education for pre-K through 8.
That's correct.
What's that?
That is correct. Every grade, and then once in high school, twice in high school.
Yeah.
But that changes.
Right, so I guess my comment was that it's just, the way it's worded, it leaves a little bit of confusion about the high school component, I guess. I mean, the second part of the sentence addresses high school graduation requirements, but I don't know, the language just is a little bit murky for me. But we can leave it as is if that is the will. And then my second question or comment was that under the implementation 3, I think maybe it would be helpful to make clear that students aren't just being excused from participation, but that time is being replaced with something else, like that they will receive alternate instruction, and not just that they're being excused entirely. So just something to clarify that language, I think, would be helpful.
We can do
I
that.
would definitely agree. And back to your first point, if you thought it was murky, the public's more likely to think it's murky. So if we can be very specific, it is pre-K through grade 8, and then consistent with the state's, except it is consistent with the state's high school regulations or requirements, which change.
Do you have to have the pre-K through 8 shall provide health
Yeah.
education for all students consistent with the state's high school? Because that will cover everything. They can't graduate.
Not high school.
but-
Has nothing to do
No,
with high school. No.
I'm
The
just
high
thinking
school
like
requirements
less
are-
sometimes is more, you know, in terms of, I don't know. MSDE could change it at any time, but to be some sort of, right, so I guess I'm trying to think of language that would be broad enough to encompass any future
I
changes
don't think the
perhaps.
pre-K through 8 is ever
Yeah.
gonna change,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned. I mean, from what I've
Yeah.
seen, it's always been there. I
Okay.
can't see it changing. Do you all have any thoughts that up through grade 8? I mean,
Or to just clarify that to make it so that it's,
I mean, could we just remove the from pre-kindergarten through grade 8 and leave it as provide comprehensive health education for all students and shall require the completion of health education coursework?
consistent with MSDE or something.
The concern is that that then creates the notion that it's not just every year in K through 8, but that it would be every year K through 12.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's not.
I was gonna ask Celeste as a parent, I feel like the parents need to know, this is every year, pre-K through 8. There's no problem with it if you're looking for it. And then, you know, it changes in high school, which is why to put what's current, because that only changed a few years ago. There was 1, yeah, and then it became 2. So, who knows, I don't see it changing again, but.
But it could, and I guess that's why you want to leave it broader for the high school
Yeah.
section. I don't know, I can live with it, I just doing a quick read,
Yeah.
I was like, what is that
Celeste, did you have the
exactly?
same sort of thought when you read that?
Yeah, I mean, we know that it happens every year, and the teachers are really great about communicating, hey, this is coming down the pike in November, or in February, we're gonna do this unit. I mean, every year, we definitely get that information. I think the biggest puzzle piece that everyone is kind of figuring out is that additional half credit that they added to high school. So my kids both opted to do that in summer school because they're trying to cram all the math and stuff that they can during the year. So that was a challenge, but I mean, every year, I don't know, the kids seem to just kind of roll with it. It's not a surprise to them.
Right.
But the teachers are very clear about that. I think when I read this, I mean, I guess I have a hard time not knowing what other parents know, because I do read everything and pay attention to things, and I'm the one that explains things to our community, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like, what would I know if I was, you know, just kind of reading this from the outside?
The first time you read it.
But I think it's pretty clear. I think I like leaving it in general. I think, like when the state added that additional half credit, that was a big surprise because everyone had their 4-year plans made and we were like, what? 4.5? What is this? You know, so we had to pivot a little bit on that. But I think I like leaving it kind of
Like as it is.
as it is,
Okay.
yeah.
Then it's also something that if we got more feedback from the community that it was really confusing, that we could address that.
Maybe you just want to say that we provide health education, instructional, Frederick County Public Schools shall provide comprehensive health education consistent with the requirements of the Maryland State Department of
That
Education.
was kind of my,
I think that sounds great.
Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because then any
Guess what? That changes all the time anyway.
And that's kind of what I'm trying
Revise
to
the
say.
policy.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that would certainly be a true statement.
Concerns are,
My concern is that then you get questions, well, what year, then you'd have parents saying, well, what years are my
Now
kids
they
going
have
to
to
get
go
it?
an extra
Very-
step. to
Which does change, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very explicit as written that pre-K through 8, you're getting it every year.
It does change though, and I think that's the
does change.
confusion. For example, you don't get the formal, the family life part of it, which is what people start to think about. What is that? Was that
because I,
fifth? And there's something in 6, 7, and 8 too, right?
yeah, but fifth grade, yeah.
So
Fifth grade is when
And
they
it
start
could go
that,
to
yeah.
4th or.
it looks different in pre-K to 4 than it does in 5 to 8, and than it does in high school.
Yes, yeah.
That goes to the substance of the curriculum, which the board is
Correct.
already going to be approving, because that's their purview anyway.
Or,
But doesn't MSD, you asked about the grade levels, MSD makes that requirement, right? That's sort of what I was getting at when you asked about, they would want to know what grade level, so anyway, maybe a moot point.
So, I mean, we can certainly make the change the way Dr. Sergo has recommended, or we can leave it as is, and you know, if the community has concerns about it, no one's here today expressing concerns about it, but that doesn't mean they won't show up when this gets scheduled for a first reading before the board, if that's the direction you want to
Well,
go.
and maybe we do bring it to the full board and see if
Yeah.
anybody else has any questions or
absolutely.
concerns,
I
or
think
if we
that
get
that's a-
public
yeah.
comment. Because I think Dr. Sergo's point is also correct. They get most concerned when it comes to the
They're most interested in family life.
human
They're
sexuality.
not interested in the healthy vegetables, that doesn't bother them.
Drugs and alcohol.
Actually, you get some calls about the healthy vegetables.
Listen, I almost
Change that, the healthy plate, didn't it just get changed?
we're not going to address that right now.
I almost quit after
The
first grade
nurse here does
parents
not want to use me.
questioned my fruits and vegetables club.
There you go.
So-
Everything's controversial now.
Okay.
Okay.
That
So we're not gonna go down that.
Going down that road,
just-
we're staying on
never
this
know.
policy at the moment. I like the MSDE piece because it does change from year to year, but also reference as consistent with the curriculum or something, right? Whatever our curriculum
And
has
that is
to be.
in there.
And that's
I mean,
in here,
it
and it's in
aligns
here,
with-
yeah.
I'm just
Bringing it
thinking, I
before
think-
the board
So
for
for
first reading.
clarity, even as is, but we'll discuss it with the full board if
Yes,
they
yes.
want to change that. If they do, we make the change between first and second reading.
And that gives an opportunity for the public to comment on that.
I feel like if you're a new parent and you're reading this for the first time because you're involved and you want to know, you're like, oh, so they have this through, whatever.
Yeah,
Just-
what are they teaching in pre?
Yeah, right.
It's gonna come
So
up,
that's,
yeah.
one thing that I questioned in my mind that maybe we could just reference, was Family Life Advisory Committee. Thank you. I'm trying to, because it says, it shows very loosely there, but their bylaws are very specific about who the members are. So without, again, marking that, the bylaws can change, maybe just a reference to the bylaws, stipulate what, because it's very specific, it's by feeder, and then there's, community and.
Whose members are in accordance with the bylaws, something along those lines.
Yes.
Something like
Yeah.
that, we can add that.
Yeah.
Does that mean we have to add another resource in here for the bylaws as well.
I would, I mean,
So,
honestly,
yeah.
I think it's
Good
always
point.
great, I'd rather have more
Yeah.
resources than not enough,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point.
And even, and I'm trying to see, was our curriculum is in here too, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of length.
And that's, you know, the researcher in me is always happy to like see more and more resources in that regard. And it's also, if we want FLAC to be a vibrant sort of committee too in the future, it gives people an opportunity to see what it's about, what are the bylaws, and maybe one or
It's
two
vibrant.
people that will read that, you know, this is true.
It's a good committee.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
no,
a
it's
good committee,
important.
it
Yeah.
is.
But I think it's good to have, have as much as you want to know,
Yeah.
and that just adds transparency again.
It does.
You know.
And accountability too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And then
Anything else?
Mr. Griffith, how do you feel about this policy and having to implement school health council and all of these other things? You feel, I just wanted to get like a good feel from you how you feel about this.
Yeah, thank you to Dr. Gall for
Yeah.
leading this and getting this cleaned up and everything else, but yeah, no, we're,
It seems broad enough for you guys to do what you need to do without having to come here and amend this every 6 months to a year, you know?
And the
Yeah.
big issue, sometime, I think pretty early on that I got on the board, we had changed it where FLAC would be able to approve materials. I remember being in San Diego, my phone blowing up because that was happening, and then that was one of Nancy's first things, was to bring it back to the board. And when I talked to the former chair of FLAC, she said, we shouldn't be approving those materials. I thought, okay, then this is a no-brainer. Passed unanimously, Mr. J felt it should come back to the board, but we skipped the step of then bringing it to CNI. So it goes from FLAC directly to the board to create less time so the materials can get in the hands of the teachers.
and I want to thank you because whenever that was switched, the first few items, you quickly got them to the board, whereas in the past, one of the reasons why it was switched, because it was 18 to 20 months by the time FLAC appointed it, by the time it was actually implemented in our classes. And that point in time, it was outdated and everything else. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
That's good. And I guess that final was 3, students may be excused, and we're just adding that to that, okay. All right, good.
All right, motion to move to first reading with the board.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
05. Policy 309, proposed 120. This is the one that's gonna take us a little time,
Yep.
maybe, I think, to walk
Yep,
through.
this is gonna take a little bit of time.
Ms. Levis?
Okay, so we're talking in item 1.05 about policy 309, discrimination and harassment, employees, applicants, community members, and policy 437, bullying, harassment, and intimidation. I'm going to take a second and give you a little bit of contextual background because when this was last discussed, I think, Ray, you were actually on this committee. So that tells you how long ago it was. So policy 437 was presented at the February 28th, 2024 policy committee meeting for its regular 400 series review. It was on for information and discussion only to understand the board's interest, and the discussion really centered on aligning 437 with policy 309, which at the time had only been recently amended. The idea was, do we need to have a broader systemic look at discrimination rather than have it, specified as employees and community members in the 300 series, and then bullying, harassment with a reference to discrimination in the content in the 400 series. The conclusion was that the conversation around 437 had to include a discussion of policy 309. So both were brought back to the policy committee at the next meeting on March 27th, 2024. There was a robust discussion at the time about the nature and role of each policy, with the ultimate direction to staff being to bring back a single strong statement in the 100 series with regulations to follow. Jeannie, I don't know if you have this context. I know Karen and Ray don't, but the 100 series in policy is generally the board's operations, the board's statements. The 200 series are operations, the facilities, the buildings, that kind of stuff. 300 series is personnel,
Okay.
400 series is students, and 500 series is curriculum generally. There are deviations from this. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about one later today as to why it's in the 500 series. Couldn't even begin to tell you. So that hopefully that gives you just some kind of gives you that framing for why we were talking back in March of 2024 about this being in the 100 series, and that being because the idea that non-discrimination, anti-bullying, those are bigger than just any one of those other categories. That is a system-wide, that is a strong board position that to take. So, with that in mind, it took some time, but we did come up with some revisions, and staff, we understood the direction to create a single policy, but staff, and we spent a fair amount of time just discussing whether it should be one or two, and staff came down on the side of it really does need to be separated into two policies, although it was not an overwhelming majority in that regard. And I convened a group of about 15 people. We had Dr. Sergo was on it, Dr. Harris and Dr. Artis were there, Dr. Alavito, our chief of schools, Dana Falls, our director of student services, Dr. Bingman, our associate superintendent for special education, Dr. Lebo. I mean, we had the entire senior brain trust involved in this conversation. So what you see before you are one proposed policy and the existing policy 309. The 437 is presented with edits. We are proposing to renumber it as 121, not 119. That was a typographical mistake on the cover sheet. Policy 309 was in the process of finalizing the revisions that staff were proposing, but we ran out of time before the deadline to upload to Granicus. So instead of throwing something at you that wasn't ready, we reposted the existing policy. I can talk you through the edits that staff is going to propose, and we will bring 309 back at the next policy committee meeting with the edits in place. Ultimately, the fact that they're coming at two different times doesn't make a huge difference, because when we get this in front of the board, once you've approved them for a first reading, they'll come back together, and that's not happening anytime soon anyway. We have a number of other policies that are already in queue. So let's talk about policy 437. And again, I need to give some context and background before I get you into the actual changes. There is a statute, Education Code Section 7-424.1, that does a number of important things. First, it directs the State Board of Education, to create a model policy on bullying, harassment, and intimidation. They were directed to do so by 2016. And then every 5 years thereafter, or maybe it was 2011, I forget what the first year was. It might have been, I think it was 2016. And then every 5 years thereafter, revise and update it. And they've done what they were supposed to do. There's a 2021 version, and we're in 2026, so there will be another update coming at some point this year. Once the model policy was created, the statute says that the local boards in 2017 have to then implement a policy on bullying, harassment, and intimidation. It does not have to be the model policy. We can do other things with it, but the model policy is there, and there are certain requirements in the model policy that we do have to adopt. As you can see from the dates, policy 437 was adopted in 2010, revised in 2017, and not touched since. So we are behind in our review of this policy. So one of the recommendations that I'm going to make is, once we have adopted the revised 437, which again renumbered to 121, that we bring it back on a short turnaround to realign it to that 2017, 2022, 2027, 2032, every 5-year schedule that the statute requires, as opposed to well, we've revised it in 2026, so now we're on a 2030 or 2031. Then we won't have the benefit of having the new model policy to guide any edits. With all of that said, I can now actually direct you to the proposed policy. And the red line version starts on page 31. The model policy requires us to have a purpose statement, which we would anyway because it's a part of our model, our template. And so we have a very clear and clean statement that the policy's purpose is to establish and promote a safe, non-threatening environment for all students to learn. That was there before. We're adding, and for all Frederick County Public School employees to work. This was an area of discussion for our team, but there was enough support internally with staff that bullying among staff is also an issue. That is something that our principals hear, that our directors hear, and that we wanted the board to address that. Dr. Sergo, do you want to speak to that?
I was just thinking, and I think this speaks to email that I'll work on responding to later today from one of our community members. This policy, we don't really have governance over community members. And so I think this policy is not intended to be applied for community members. If community members have a concern about an interaction they've had with employees, there are other structures and systems in place for them to file that complaint. And so I just want to make sure that's clear, that the board isn't in charge of the community, but we do have governance over our employees and our students.
And this was one of the reasons why we felt that we needed to have two separate policies, because we do speak to discrimination more broadly than we do to bullying, harassment, and intimidation.
So the discrimination policy would be inclusive
It's more inclusive
of
for
community members.
We do, I would hedge that just a little in that we do have control over what happens in our buildings.
Correct,
There
and
have been parents or community members that were not allowed in our buildings. So in that sense.
And there's a different process that would govern how we would kind of investigate and address that.
So in terms of the definitions, you will see that we have added a number of definitions to what was already in policy 437. We have added a definition of bullying. I will tell you that the model policy requires this definition, but we need to make some further revisions to align more closely to the model policy while still expanding it to include staff. The model policy has a little bit more in there, and it is one of the definitions that the model policy says is required. I really don't quite understand how a model policy that we're not actually expected to follow verbatim can require us to have certain definitions, but I'm not sure that's a fight worth fighting, right? We'll adopt the definitions.
So for the bullying definition, you're going to add something that addresses staff in addition to students.
Number 2, it only says students, we have to add
Yeah.
employees.
Yes.
You could just make a note of that, Nikki.
Yes, the definition for 1 needs to be expanded, as does the definition of 2 for the same reason. Although the definition of that phrase, bullying, harassment, or intimidation, is not one of the model policy required definitions. Cyberbullying is a model policy definition. It too needs further revision to align more closely. I will be free and frank with you. I took this out of a policy from the District of Columbia because I forgot that it was in the model policy from the state of Maryland. I was looking, I just didn't see it. And so I was looking for a definition. I found one I liked from the District of Columbia, and I grabbed it. Harassment is another model policy definition. We are in alignment with this one. Hazing is not a model policy definition, but we felt as staff that hazing is an important item to address within the context of this policy.
Yes.
Intimidation, same model policy definition, needs some further alignment. Parent is our definition of parent, same definition we've used in the last policy we talked about. Protected class is not a definition from the model policy. That's really just my way of not having to rewrite all of the different characteristics that are protected over and over and over again. And then school-related activity or school-sponsored activity are not model policy, but our definition that we've used for those terms. The policy position, there are currently 3. We're adopting the existing statement against bullying, harassment, and intimidation with the addition of cyberbullying. We are providing a statement of the board's prohibition against the use of bullying, harassment, or intimidation as it previously existed, slightly modified in terms of the way it's framed, so it focuses on as the disrupting the orderly operation of the school, adding the cyberbullying reference there, or the use of social media as a way of, even though it's a part of cyberbullying, we wanted to call that out, adding the hazing activities, and maintaining the reprisal or retaliation prohibition. We also maintain the existing language with respect to not transferring the victims as a way of resolving a bullying, harassment, intimidation situation.
So, yes.
I want to ask a clarifying question, Steve, and I apologize, because I know we talked about this at length. Discrimination, you talked about legally being focused on a protected class, that the law, that sort of, the discrimination policy is what sort of is the offshoot and leads to the Title IX and things like that. But I thought for bullying, and when I'm thinking about, and I'm gonna lean on Dr. Harris here, for bullying, it can either be a protected class or it can be any unwanted interaction that is severe and pervasive. I'm not sure. Huh? And repeated,
Which is in there.
it's severe, repeated, and pervasive. That doesn't seem to be coming out from this. There's only emphasis on protected class. And I think systemically, our emphasis, Dr. Harris, is on any unwanted interaction that is pervasive, severe, and repeated. Where is that in this policy? And if it's missing, might we want to add it?
Bullying as a standalone definition does not reference protected class.
So bullying is where that lives, but harassment has to be specific.
Harassment speaks more towards the
Protected class. I just want to make sure, because I think there are a number of places, like when administrators or whomever are processing bullying complaints, we really focus on this idea of you had one really poor interaction, and that's so disappointing, right? So you came into a school and someone made you feel unwelcome, versus every time I come to the school, nobody makes eye contact with me. Nobody shakes my hand, nobody says hello. That's different, right? So I think the idea of repeated, pervasive, and unwanted is important, and I just want to make sure we surface that somewhere so we can show staff and students what that is.
That came up a lot. We would get calls, you have a student, they'd have a blow up. You get a call, my child is being bullied. That child's not a the child that...
Is it bothering or bullying? That's what I used to say as a principal. Is it bothering or bullying?
They caught that student, he's got some issues, they caught him at the right time. Didn't matter who it was sitting next to him, they were sitting next to him. It wasn't personal. And you'd have to explain about bullying, so the repeated and targeted is just so important,
So those are the three policy statements proposed. I'm going to suggest that there's a fourth policy statement that we might add that comes out of the model policy. And the model policy is linked in the related information, but I will read it to you so you can hear it to decide whether you agree that it makes sense to incorporate it. All students have the right to be free from bullying, harassment, or intimidation. MSDE is committed to providing a safe, productive, and inclusive learning environment. Bullying problems are symptomatic of relationship problems best addressed holistically by students, schools, parent caregivers, and the entire community. Maryland schools should be places where students are surrounded by caring adults who encourage students to treat others with kindness and empathy while helping to build a relationship-focused, welcoming, supportive school environment fostering academic and personal growth for every student. I would not take it verbatim because that's written from MSD's perspective, but I think there's a lot of good, strong language in there that our board might want to adopt.
I agree.
yeah.
Okay. So we will incorporate pieces of that into the revised policy statement.
The other thing that always came up a few years ago, and I was looking, the other policy had been updated a lot, started in 2005 and had been updated a lot, but was that whole thing of separating out harassment from bullying. And they're like, we're getting a lot of things in the newspaper. Somebody's, whispered behind the back and called someone a name one time, but that was very offensive and upsetting, and that wasn't bullying. And when the students were saying, where does that get addressed? And that becomes much more the harassment. And the part here about acknowledges that students who are victims won't be moved to a different school. Still doesn't address, but I know you can't tie the hands of administrators. I think parents have this perception that when their student is the victim, they're the one that automatically gets moved to a different one.
That's in the regulation in terms of sort of, we call it, supportive measures and sort of, that's very unique. There are sometimes where the person will say, I want to be moved, and there's other times where it's very specific.
It's not particularly unique, and it is probably one of the number one criticisms I hear from parents about our bullying and harassment policy.
But it's not driven by meaning that's not an outcome that's prescribed. That may be an
But
application.
it's what's happening in the schools. So is there a place in our policy to say, not just, you're not gonna be transferring students who are the victims of bullying to another school, but also they shouldn't be the ones feeling like they are being punished for telling a teacher, I'm being bullied and harassed, because then what happens is they cease telling anybody while they're still being bullied and harassed.
So I think it's hard to sort of respond to because that's a bit of a generalization, and I think there are a number of incidents where something different happens. We have a supportive measures plan form, which is new this year, that schools are using to document how they're giving kids that protected space that has lots of options on it. That's part of our regulatory language. There's also opportunities to sort of talk to a student. We don't just randomly pick up students and move them to other schools. So there may be some.
And I'm not talking about that part, because I understand that. I'm talking about when a kid is being told, now you have to just pick a different classroom. We're gonna put you with a different teacher. So they're still in the same school.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens, I think, for reasons that are not about retaliation. So I think practically speaking, it can be, at the secondary level, it can be related to master scheduling. It can be about, there's a lot of different
Should be the
things.
victim of the bullying and harassment that's moved.
It just depends on the circumstances.
Exactly, but
Because
that's
if someone has an IEP, if someone is receiving,
It's perception, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely.
Something is happening here between
Yeah.
our communication and our policy and regulation, and then what parents and students are perceiving
Sure,
to
fair
be
point.
happening, right? And that's something that we should address, because perception becomes reality.
yeah, but it's not driven by policy. I think,
Yeah, the policy
That's-
statement, I think,
yeah.
is pretty clear, unless you wanted to say not just to a different school, but to a different,
Well, we
Not
can't
a
tie
classroom,
the
but like,
hands.
we're not
Right.
trying to tie any hands, but I just want to make sure that, like, especially,
I think from a policy statement, we're being clear that it's not the victims that should have to make the adjustment, but then it is in regulation where it has to.
well, it's just, no, I think sometimes that happens, but not because the regulation says so, or the policy. There are so many factors that an administrator has to look at and weigh in making those decisions to change somebody's schedule.
I think what would end up happening is there's a very clear statement in the policy against retaliation or reprisal against the victim for reporting it. If a family felt that the principal was changing their child's class assignments as a retaliatory act, there are mechanisms for raising those complaints. They would be submitted, reviewed, investigated, and a decision would be made as to whether it was or not retaliatory. So it's not a,
and I don't think it's actually retaliatory. I don't think the principal or anybody's doing it necessarily out of retaliation. They're doing it because it's easier to do that because they're more amenable, right? The kid's gonna say, it becomes the easier thing to do, not because it's a retaliation.
I don't, that may be the perception that it's easier, but I don't think
Yeah, because I don't
that
think they're thinking it's a
the reality is that it's not an easy decision that's made. There are too many factors to even begin to start listing them that drives that decision.
Yeah.
And we've had, it's sort of, I'll even offer sort of not to belabor the point, but, if you have an employee who feels like a student is harassing them, we can't always remove the student from their class. Sometimes we have to change the teacher schedule. So, there's just so much nuance here, but I do think managing perception is an important factor.
I think that's all I'm asking. I don't know from a parent's point of view.
Well, and I actually was going back, this is my 3rd anniversary of being here. My first date was January 17th of 23, when the CAC started. So anyway, so I was here for this conversation. I did not like statement 3 in the policy statement, and I just don't, because of this entire conversation about the fact that we have to bring this up to say, oh, this is not a preferred, well, does that need to sit in the policy? I feel like almost the responses and the actions taken do live in the regulations. But I think that pulling this out as a number 3 and having it sitting by itself, it says right there, it is not a preferred mode of responding. Well, that tells me as a parent, this could have, we'd rather not do it, but it's here, and I just don't like how it reads up.
Which one is that?
The same one.
The one we're talking about, under C, policy statement number 3.
I think the pushback I would give is, I understand your perspective.
Yeah.
That makes it seem like it can, but if you don't have any statement at all, then that may be perceived as, well, this is exactly what's going to happen, because the board doesn't even say, we don't want you to do this. So it's absolutely going to be my child, the victim, who gets moved.
Yeah.
I think this statement, in some fashion, maybe this isn't the right way to state it, but this statement is important to maintain that position that the board has, that we don't want the victim to be the one that gets moved unless it's done in consultation with the family. Right. We want it to be resolved using other mechanisms.
Right.
So
Maybe we go with more of a positive, like your language just in your statement just now sounded more positive. This is what we want to do. We want to, ensure consistency with student schedules. We want to protect their comfort and their freedom and their ability to pursue their education without fear of, repercussions.
Yeah.
But I like the positive. This number 3 just sounds negative to me. Like, we don't want to do this. It may not be, but I like what you just said about this is what we do want to do. And I think that is an important tone to set in our policy.
It's also specific, because you're mentioning there are schedules, what is the child's prefer, like what are they trying to do with their education, where are they trying to go, what are their goals, and that we're trying to align with that, right? And I think the specificity is good too, to remind parents and everybody else that, yeah, we're trying to stay, like, we're not just trying to move kids around, we're not like, this is a method of last resort, not the first thing that somebody would go to.
Yeah,
Does that
I
make sense?
think what Celeste is getting to is going from the more positive
Yeah.
and just a little bit of added verbiage that just kind of
Yeah.
and tries to set the record more to where it is to help with that public perception. I think
Yes.
that's all I'm asking.
take a stab at revising that language. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
as I
I
said, that's
feel like-
largely existing language. That
Yeah.
language has been there for 15, 17 years.
I think there could be yeah, but I think what it's saying is we don't do that unless we've been talked to the victim and we've consulted with them. It's not done again. It says here that it's only done in consultation, agreement, or at the request of the victim.
And for whatever reason, even though that's been there for 15 years, that's just not how it's being perceived.
Right, but I think if you're looking for language that emphasizes it, the language exists, which I think is what Mr. Blivis is trying to say.
But we can certainly reframe it. And thankfully, we have a recording, so I don't have to try and remember.
You don't have to try to remember.
Right?
And we're going to be bringing it to
Positive
the
spin.
full board, right? So we are going to be able to get the
Right,
benefit of that public input and what the other
Yes.
board members have to say, so,
Yeah.
and that's important.
So turning to section D, the implementation section, we retain the existing language on best practices, striking out the header into that paragraph. We direct the board, the policy, directs the superintendent to establish and regularly update the regulations, to provide mechanisms for filing the complaint, and requiring prompt investigation of a complaint. The third paragraph, which is a new paragraph, this is the board's statement about the expectations of the consequences. And you will note that it includes a board member being subject to the policy of the board. That's not something that the superintendent has the ability to enforce. That's a board function, right? To recommend removal or to censure. But staff felt that it was appropriate for the board to demonstrate that that you are all subject to the same rules that apply to everyone that works within the system or is educated within the system. Staff discipline, if they're the bully or if they're the engaged in the conduct, is through the employee code of conduct. Discipline of a student through the student code of conduct, and then discipline of a community member if a community member is engaging in bullying through the no trespass process that we have on the ground that such actions disrupt or disturb the normal educational function of the institution, which is the language in the statute that authorizes us to issue a no trespass. What you don't see there that I think I would recommend adding, and I didn't note it, but I do believe this is in the model policy as well, is directing that there be professional learning provided with respect to the policy. If you look at the model policy, there is a lot of discussion about the complaint process, about the student supports. All of that will live in our regulation. I treat their model policy as a little p, not a big P, meaning we're splitting out the pieces of their policy that are the how and the portions of their policy that are the why or the what. So that is policy 437, which we, again, would propose to renumber to 121. Any other discussion you want? We've kind of had discussion as we've gone along, but is there other discussion you want to have on 437 before we move to 309?
For 3A, could we just add, so censure by the board and possible referral to the State Board of Education for removal from the board so that it's specific on where that referral goes?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I don't have anything else. I think this is good.
I'm just doing it.
Cool.
Triple check.
I'm trying to think, Cecil County, who's above the state board? But there's like Department of, I can't
Like an
remember.
in-between,
Yeah,
like an ethics board or?
no, it was, I'm trying to think of Cecil County, they had a member, and several times there had been referrals to the state board.
Yeah.
They denied them, but in the end, it wasn't the state board that she resigned before it went to this hearing body.
The body that would review a state board decision would be the circuit court. The circuit court in the county in which the LEA sits. So for us, it would be the Frederick County Circuit Court. There, it would have been the Cecil County Circuit Court. That's the body that would review a state board decision.
Yeah, which is what.
And then from there up through the judicial process.
Yeah, there was somebody else. And Senator Carrazza has a piece of legislation, I think she's introduced, if it's not already introduced, about shortening the time.
Yes, there's legislation that's been introduced about limiting the time to 90 days, and it also seems to expand who can make a request to the state board for the removal of a board member.
But I think it's just the state board. Okay.
It is.
I feel like there's somebody above them that, like an office of like hearings and something like.
No, so what you may be thinking of the Office of Administrative Hearings, what will sometimes happen with proceedings like a state board proceeding, it gets referred to the Office of Administrative Hearings who conducts the hearing, much like you all can hire a hearing examiner when a matter comes before you for an appeal. The state board can refer it over to the Office of Administrative Hearings, who will conduct an evidentiary hearing, will make a recommendation back to the state board. It is ultimately up to the state board to decide if they're going to accept that recommendation or not. They don't always accept it.
But I think the time frame was with reference to the OAH. I think that's where everything was bogging down. I believe, I keep hearing them referenced, I think the 90 days is, but I could stand corrected. People kept talking about them, so.
I'd have to go back and look at the
But it's
legislation.
still-
It's not what I focus on.
It's the state board, so that's fine.
So, not going to ask you to take action on 437 yet. I want to talk you through the proposed changes in 309, if there's no other conversation about 437.
Just one quick question, and it may be that maybe I missed in this, and I know typically in private business and so forth, I might have to sign the handbook and all this stuff, and we've had so much discussion about signatures and signing of things. Something that just says that anyone accepting a position with FCPS or a member of the board, that you're also accepting that you're gonna abide by our codes of conduct. If you're gonna be a student, and, do you know, like, something that just says, which should be obvious, honestly, but perhaps is not particularly obvious, but that accepting these positions is also accepting that this is the code of conduct that they will abide by. Something along those lines.
And so,
Do you know, like, oh, go ahead.
Well, so what happened, we had, our procedures, I'm trying to think.
The board retreat thing.
Yeah, it was,
your norms?
norms, thank you, board norms. And there were members that said, I'm not signing, and it's been a problem throughout. Previous board, there was a board member that had a particular problem with one word, and then, so it came down to it, and then ultimately, Nancy, with her HR experience, it was like, when you join an
Yeah.
organization, you sign saying you've seen the regulations or
It's
the.
an acknowledgement, not an agreement.
Acknowledgement, not that you're, but I think what Janie's saying
Yeah.
is, when you take on this position, you then agree to,
The code of conduct.
Code of
in a sense,
conduct.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe not.
I certainly would lean on Mr. Blivis, but I think broadly, the existing statute around the censure of a board member or the removal, I don't know that it could be predicated on board norms. There's a set of criteria that would meet that threshold. As a staff, in the implementation policy, we do not have a disciplinary role in board members, right? So,
Yeah, and not the
So-
board members, but let's say you have an employee that comes into FCPS, right? And you present to them, like, this is our code of conduct.
oh yeah, we hold them
All of
accountable.
that, yeah,
But
yeah.
our code of conduct is as the person who writes it, our code of conduct is a sort of a reader's guide to all of our policies and regs. It's nothing different. There's nothing in the code of conduct that doesn't exist in board policy and regulation. And so that's like our anchor, right? So when we're
Right,
disciplining
exactly.
you or investigating you, we're actually investigating you for a violation of board policy or superintendent's regulation. I don't know how that
In
translates.
terms of the, right.
Yeah, I don't know how that
Well,
translates.
maybe it's more like an acknowledgement.
No, so I think that actually probably falls into a discussion that we'll get into when we get into the 100 series, which is
Okay.
the board and systemic policies, when
There
we
we
talk
go.
about
Okay.
organization of the board and
Sure.
governance of the school
Yeah.
system. Because essentially, they're not only just agreeing to this policy,
No,
like
they're not.
anybody is
Yeah.
agreeing to every single policy
Right, and
within the
regulation
scope
and all
of,
of that.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, I don't necessarily think we need to single it out here, as long as when we get into the
Right.
organization of the board and the governance of the
And I was
school
meaning like a
system.
broad statement, not just a
Right.
board member
Board
statement.
Policy 300, which at least with respect to personnel specifically speaks to code of conduct. So, I mean, it's in there already.
Okay,
In that the expectation is that they're going to behave a certain way, and the employee code of conduct, the document itself is really a reflection
Of everything
of
else.
that statement from the board.
Okay.
So I would err against, I think, because you already have that with respect to personnel. You can't really say that with respect to students, because we have an obligation to enroll any student who is
Well, that's true.
eligible to be a student in our system.
Right.
And as Dr. Sergo said, there's really, the governance and the norms of the board members, or I guess as Ray said, that's really a 100 series discussion.
Makes sense to me. No. That's why I asked and I brought it up.
And it's coming soon.
And it
100 is coming
It's coming sooner than we
Yes.
expect, yes.
Soon to a theater near you.
Coming soon, yes.
All right, so if there's nothing else on 437, I'll move you into 309.
Let's do it.
So 309, where am I? 309 was adopted in 2005 and last revised in November of 2023. So this is a relatively fresh policy, but it does couple with 437, at least in the conversation. So these are the edits that staff have discussed and that we anticipate recommending. We are going to propose to retitle the policy to a simple That's it. We are proposing to renumber it to 120 and move it into the 100 series. We are proposing to remove the reference to harassment in the purpose statement and incorporate a reference to educational programming and employment practices. That's really the first place where we're making this a more broad statement on discrimination than just with respect to employees, applicants, and community members. The definitions, we will align with our other policy definitions, and we will, and that would include 437 as we've revised it, or as it will be revised. And we will add whatever other definitions are needed, either as identified by staff or by this panel. In the policy statement, we will propose to keep the existing statement about commitment to providing a safe and supportive environment. We are going to propose moving the sentence in the first paragraph about the treatment of everyone with mutual respect to its own standalone paragraph and not buried within paragraph 1. We are going to add a statement regarding maintaining an environment free from discrimination, harassment, and non-discrimination with respect to enrollment. Enrollment, whether it's in a program or a course, that's a statement that staff felt was appropriate. We will move the statement with respect to the referral to the policy 117 into the implementation section. So it's going to come out of the policy and just move into implementation. And then once we get there, we will add other references. So it's not just the anti-racism, but also the harassment policy would be referenced. There were a couple of others, I don't have them listed in front of me, but we would add other similar references. This is a little unique for how we approach policies, because usually we just have those references in the related information section. But since the board felt it was necessary in the current iteration of the policy to call out that if you have a concern about anti-racism, go here, we felt like, well, let's keep it and expand upon that for this policy. And we propose to keep the prohibition statement on discrimination, which is paragraph 3, adding prohibitions on the use of hate language or hate symbols, adding the refusal to enroll a student or expel a student or withhold privileges based on a protected class status, and adding that a statement against discipline or retaliation for filing a complaint. So a non-retaliation statement. And then we would keep the employee statement that you see in paragraph 4, largely unedited.
Oh, sorry, sometimes you have to reread. The first time I read it, I'm like, not understand. Now I got it.
So within the implementation section, as I said, we will refer to other policies besides 117, but that's where this would live. There would be instruction to the superintendent to establish regulations for filing complaints, and the same requirement for prompt investigation that's referenced in 437. The intention is that we will have different regulations for the different potential victims, victim groups. So students will have a regulation so they know, if I'm a student and I believe I've been discriminated against, here's the regulation that's going to outline what I need to do. If I'm a staff member, here's a regulation that's going to outline what I need to do. If I'm a community member, or here's the regulation that's going to outline what I need to do. We're going to break those out so they're very clear, separate statements of what your options are and what you can expect from the process. We are going to remove the referral to policies and procedures for reporting that you currently see. That's really paragraph 3, because that belongs in the regulations. It doesn't really belong in the policies. And frankly, that is one of the things that drove the staff to say, you know what, this needs to be a broader, bigger discussion. Because while the policy is titled employees, applicants, community members, we give instructions in here on how to deal with student matters. Why would a student ever even look to go there?
Right.
So that was part of one of the things that drove it. And then we will propose to establish the same consequences as you see in 437 for removal, to incorporate into this policy for violating it, addressing the board members, staff, students, and community members.
Mr. Lewis, just because I know we had this conversation on one of the surfaces here, the word harassment is in both policies. This one, are we calling this 121? This one, what is this
This
one?
one will be 120, the
No,
non-discrimination.
that's this first one we just finished.
The harassment policy?
That's
That was
121.
437?
Yeah.
That will be
Okay,
121.
so this 121 is sort of protected classes, but also you don't have to meet that threshold because you could be bullied for any reason. This one, 309,
which will become 120.
is boundaried by the legal definition of discrimination. So this isn't any unwanted, this is discrimination by law, which is different. And I just think that's really, we had a lot of discussion about that, because I think the question that a community member would ask is like, you know, if you're saying that you're being discriminated against, you have to meet those legal definitions. If you're saying you're being bullied, then the threshold is a little bit different.
Yes, yes, very good point.
I just wanted to sort of say that out loud because I was trying to
Yeah,
process
no,
it.
that's a really good point. I think when they come to the board, that's, yeah.
And it makes sense that it would focus, that this policy would focus on the discrimination and legal aspects of it.
Yeah, and the specificity with how to deal with things. When I was first on the board, we had a board member that somebody filed a complaint against through the fraud line because they had no other place that they could think of how to. You know, it was the only resource available, came through the fraud line. And then COVID messed with all that. But, you know, so more specifics in support and how to, kind of how to is better for people.
So my recommendation is going to be that both 437 and 309 come back at the next policy committee meeting. There are a number of edits that we need to make to align 437 with the model policy, and while we've talked about it, you've not seen the language on 309. If you felt comfortable approving 437 today, you certainly could. But I think there's enough that we can move that to the, bring it back for the next meeting. It will create a very robust agenda for the next meeting, but I actually do think we can get through all of it because I'm forecasting for you that at least one of the policies we're going to recommend that it be decommissioned and not replaced because it's just not applicable anymore. And three of the items that are on the agenda for next week or the next month are information discussion only. So those tend to take less time. The special education one might take a little more time, but I think we can manage and balance and get everything done. I'm comfortable.
So are you looking for a motion on both of these, or should we take them
I don't
separately?
think, you don't need a motion at all.
It comes
No,
back to
we'll just-
policy.
Yeah, and I
Gotcha.
agree. I think we should bring
Yeah.
them back together, and hopefully there won't be too much additional to discuss. But I would like to see them both together before we advance them to the board.
Absolutely.
So I'm
More
good
clarity
with
to
that.
everything.
And I think that makes
That would
sense.
have been my motion.
Perfect.
So that brings us to 1.06, policy 510, copyright laws.
I mean, these next few are
I like
doozy.
to go-
Mr. Blivis.
Oh,
I mean, 515, really, I had to read that 3 times.
I'm sure. We'll get there.
No, I'm like, I actually printed those two out there. I'm like, there's, really?
So policy 510 is our copyright laws policy. It was adopted in June of 2009 and has not been revised since. Frankly, there may not be a lot of revisions necessary because copyright law hasn't changed all that significantly.
Don't we have this in
It's
the
about to probably be, maybe.
intellectual property?
And I'm gonna get there. You're jumping on me here.
I'm like, what, this again?
So we're not proposing any changes at the moment. This is on for information discussion only to hear if the board has any other interests with respect to the policy. I will tell you that we do have other policies and regulations already in place that do speak to copyright in some fashion. One of them is policy 305, which governs employee conduct, and there's a section in there that speaks to employee-created works and who has the copyright and who can benefit from that copyright
Right.
between employees and the board. We have regulation 30501, which supports 305 and goes into more detail about the process about determining who has the copyright and who gets to benefit from it. We also have 500-29, which is a regulation, which is really supportive of 510. Again, the numbering system is whacked. We're fixing it.
Seems like these should live
We're
together.
getting there.
Yes, that is a technical legal term.
Yes,
It is whack.
That's in the third year of law school.
Yes.
It does feel like these should live together, though. in some-
And they will, and when we revise that regulation, we will renumber it to align with, make it 51001 to align. Because 500-29 is a very extensive discussion of the use of copyright materials.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's really much that needs to be changed about the policy per se. It is 16, 17 years old, so I do think a review by my office to see if there are any changes to copyright rules
Yeah.
that we need to incorporate into the policy, or if those are things we need to update in the regulation, I think that would be appropriate. But if there's something that the panel would like us to do, I'm happy to hear from you.
I would just suggest in schools, it's the media specialist that talks to the staff. In my day, we always talk to the staff about copyright. So you might just have head of media services look it over and just see if there's anything that she thinks might be applicable to what happens in schools.
We can include her in the conversation, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, every time we're going through these, that we come to one of these policies, I'm like, why is this a standalone policy? And I would feel this way about this one and the next one that we're gonna talk about. That I would prefer that we roll it into another policy and decommission this one, because it doesn't make sense to me to have a separate policy saying that we're gonna follow copyright laws, because
Well, especially since we already have it.
Except every year, the media specialist talks to the staff
Right.
about
Well,
following.
and they should.
Already in the intellectual property and copyright one, don't we?
Well, so the intellectual property and copyright speaks to the employee, that speaks to an employee who has created a work. So
Oh, I see
I'm
what
an
you're
English
saying.
teacher, and I've written a book about how, the best way to write a paragraph.
I don't even know what it is.
Making something up, right? And I then go and want to publish that book. The question is, well, is that my work, or is that a work that's owned by the Board of Education because you created that work using board resources? That's what 305 speaks to. It doesn't speak to, I want to go use an article written by some scholar at Yale University,
sure.
and I want to incorporate that into my lesson. How do I do that while respecting the
Copies am I allowed to make? And-
You'll have to, Nikki will have to check me on this. I suspect that around sometime in early 2009, there was some change to the copyright law, and there was a decision to say, oh, we need a policy to make sure we're following it, and they put this together. So, that's what I'm guessing. That's why, because there's like,
It's also one of these things in copyright law, it's constantly attacked by different corporations and stuff that want to hang on to their copyright. And there's oftentimes little tweaks and things, so it is a good idea to go back, see what may have. And also, I feel like there's been some noises this year that the federal government wants to take another look at some of these copyright laws. And we're gonna have, with the advent of AI and agents, everything else, students, teachers, everybody else has more access to creating their own materials of all kinds, right? Digital materials as well as, say, like a book like you were referencing, or curriculum or whatever. We should make sure that it's clear, like, where would they find that information if they were looking to understand for themselves where copyright law may fit in. That makes sense?
And, yeah, it does, and the regulation is robust.
Yeah.
It's one of the long ones, and it has a lot of detail about the use of copyright, and I believe it also includes the students' copyright to their work.
So then, do we need this? Do we decommission this and make sure it's all,
Maybe, it may be we don't need much more than just a statement.
add it to page one, the other one? Yeah.
Maybe it just needs to be a statement in one of our other board policies about respecting the laws of our country and state and locality, and that would to include copyright. We do try and anchor all of our regulations in a policy, and so, like you said, it makes sense for 500-27 to really be 51001,
Right.
so that they live next to each other.
Take a look and see what you can.
There has to be, so there does have to be some place that it's anchored, but, we can.
there's gotta be a,
See what makes the most sense.
That I think is what I would agree with. I also remember going to a professional development, and the presenter said, there's no teacher that is in jail for copyright infringement.
But there was some, and Nikki, you'll have to look this up, there's some I forgot what it was, when we started going to consumables, and Dr. Harris may also remember this, when we, there was some act, and I forgot what it was called, what basically said, like said that teachers couldn't copy, you can't make a copy of like a consumable workbook, right? And I think that probably came from the textbook manufacturers, wanting to make sure that they get all their money, but there are some other things I think that are more contemporary that's.
Yes.
And yet now I can go online and I can search for
Correct.
the Eureka Math 5, which my son was using 2 years ago,
Correct.
and download pages out of it when he left his workbook at school.
Right, which I do all the time too, for the record. I think some of those are open source now, because like when you think about Engage New York, which is, you know, there's some open source history to that particular product. But I do think there's some exemptions for public school employees, but there's also some limitations.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what this person was referencing.
And also our visual and performing arts too.
Well, I was gonna say 30 seconds of a song or something,
Well,
right?
yeah, the Instagram limit, they call it. You're allowed to use up to 90 seconds of something before you're in copyright
I don't think
violation.
90, it was never 90.
No, yeah.
You have to make a statement that I don't have the rights to this, but also it's different when you buy scripts or rent script from a company.
And all of that is addressed in the regulation. And so that returns us back to the question of what's the place for this policy?
Are we reviewing 500 soon? Curriculum?
Yes, 500 is on, it is, so 500 and 501, we put to the end of the 500 series because they were so recently revised and implemented. It gave a little bit of time to see if there's, you know, if the new versions of them work. So they are, I think, our very last meeting in June.
So I pulled it up because that seems like a place where we could reference following copyright law. And we talk about all instructional materials, digital tools, textbooks. I feel like if we just put a reference in there,
Yeah.
and then also knowing that policy 305 addresses
The employee side, the
employee side, I think that would cover it, and I don't think we need a separate policy.
Yeah.
That's my
it's-
opinion.
I'm with you what Janie says, whatever makes most sense, and a list of acceptable
Especially if the
usage.
regulation lives in 500 dash, like just put it in the 500.
So what we will do, because this is not on the agenda as an action item, it's a discussion only, we will bring 510 back on the agenda when 500 is on the agenda, so you can act on both at the same time.
Makes sense. And that gives you time to take a look, make sure nothing has changed. Or if you want to hold something because there's a new case going through or something.
Yeah, no, if the case is going through, you can't hold it.
Well, not hold it, but there's something you want to just take a look at. All of these things happen
The
these days.
Supreme Court doesn't check with us before,
That's not really what I'm
their
trying to get to,
timelines.
actually. but yeah.
That brings us to policy 515, waiver of Board of Education policy. It is packet page 4, it starts on packet page 42. It is a robust policy of 2 sentences.
When was this from?
It
2009
was
also?
also
What happened in
same day, so,
In 2009.
and nothing has happened with it.
Brad, that was.
August, or June 10th, 2009.
18 years now,
nothing
or
since.
17 years now.
This is also information and discussion only, no action is required of you. And really here to understand the board's interests. I do have a recommendation that this could be rolled into either policy 101,
Yeah.
organization of the board, or policy 106, general powers and duties.
General powers and, yes.
Yeah.
If you want it in 101, so 101 is scheduled for a board reading on February 11th. Second reading will come sometime thereafter. Because today is not an action item, this would have to get back onto a policy committee meeting for an action item in order to remain in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, so the public knows that we are acting on it. It is possible that we can get this back on to a policy committee agenda and put into policy 101 in between first and second reading. So if you want it in 101, we can get it there more quickly. If you think it fits better in 106, we'll do exactly what we just did with 510. We'll put a pin in this, mark it for decommission, for action on your part to decommission it, to recommend decommissioning. When policy 106 gets put on the agenda, the 100 series will start in the 26-27 school year, so we're not that far away from policy 106 coming back before the committee. Whichever way you want to do it is fine. It can be done either way. It's really just, do you feel it fits better in 101 or 106?
What's the number of the corresponding regulation referenced here? Well, okay.
What regulation?
Well, that's my point. It says, okay, so this is about the board granting waivers from its own policies. The process to decide whether a waiver is legitimate or required is apparently supposed to be driven through regulation, right? There'd be some emergency circumstance or some hardship, there'd be some criteria. So do we have a corresponding
We
regulation?
do. 500-36 is waivers of board policy. It provides a procedure.
Okay, so
It's-
that's what I'm looking for,
it's
because,
one page with a form attached to it, which I'm not surprised you didn't catch that, because I know you've gone through to try
I've
and
gone through,
get
well, apparently I must have had a word count requirement to, what's it called?
It's 500-36 is waivers of board policy, and that is the regulation. It was implemented in 2004. Actually, it was implemented in 1991 and
my Lord,
amended in
Lord.
2004.
So,
And it references policy 515.2, and there is no 515.2. So
it's from Jack Dale, it's going way back. So here's where, this is where I'm getting at, and Steve, I'm gonna lean on you to sort of give me your first cut at this. My interpretation is that this is about the board requesting a waiver to the state. Okay? Versus, I'm making this up. The board can't grant a waiver for a graduation requirement. The board can't, but there are things, I'm just gonna play this out in my mind. Let's talk about the 180-day waiver.
Right.
Okay? We run out of snow days, right? No longer, but there was a time where local boards could make a request to the state board to waive the 180, well, that still sort of exists.
Yeah, it does.
Waive the 180-day requirement. But all of it is sort of still, the nexus is still to the board. Like, or there's a policy and it's a financial hardship. Is this local just to us?
this is local to us. If you look at the regulation, it speaks to empowering local schools and divisions of the school system in their school improvement efforts to apply for waivers from specific state bylaws or county policies. The place where you are most likely to see a waiver request, because
Yeah, like
frankly, it's
why?
not coming from our schools unless it's coming from a charter. That is where you might see most commonly a request for a waiver. But it is geared towards the local board's function
Okay.
of establishing policies for the operations of the system, and also to interpret the state board's bylaws. They call them bylaws, but
It's interesting because I think one of the backbones of good governance is consistency of implementation. And so I wonder about how, in what way you would, what would be a circumstance where you would even want to exercise this? I'm just sort of talking out loud.
No,
I spent some time trying to think about where,
Yeah.
you know,
Like-
at what point would what would we be asking a waiver for?
From a principal, nonetheless.
At the school level.
oh, yeah, that doesn't.
You know, our dress code addresses if you want to have a uniform policy at your school.
Yeah, I just,
So there's no waiver request for the dress code. The charters have, can and do request waivers from time to time.
Is there a reason to even have this?
Well, yes, I think you do need to have this statement because you want to make sure it is expressly articulated that the board has the ability to waive its policies.
I feel like it's just not articulated very well, perhaps.
Well, that may be, but it also doesn't belong as its own. I don't think it belongs as its own standalone.
The question is where.
And I certainly don't think it belongs in the 500 series.
Definitely not.
Except to the extent that the regulation speaks to principals asking for a waiver.
But it's still.
Because I was like, if the board is here, why do we then, and we want to waive our policies, why do we need a regulation from the superintendent who we oversee?
Right.
well, the regulation,
is
because
the
you have to have
process.
a process, like, and you don't, policy doesn't go. And that's why I'm sort of, feverishly trying to look some information up to think of what scenario, because because we'd have to revise the reg, because the reg is over 20 years old, and I'm trying to think like what would be how in a governance structure would we even receive these requests and process them?
Is there any reason why we wouldn't put it in policy 100, which is governance of the school system?
Thought about one.
Which is also desperately needs a redo.
Well, that's.
I know it's on our schedule.
That's coming next year.
It does seem like a governance approach, and so that seems like that might be a place to mention waivers when we talk about
Pen
governance.
it and put it in policy.
It could go in 100, it could go in 101, it could go in
I've looked at all three of them now.
106.
I think 100 makes the most sense to me,
Because
but
it is a governance piece of it too, and then to what Dr. Sergo's point is, they have to figure out a regulation, so what does this look like? What does this whole process look like? Yeah, so.
I mean, it could also fit in 114.
So it's a bingo card, is what we're saying.
Well, 114, that's policy development.
Yeah.
That's where you expressly create, where you say, here's our process for creating policy. Does it fit to include a statement there that we also retain the right to waive it if needed?
If it's specific to policies, then
But that's specific, but it's not the waiver is not necessarily specific to board policy. It could be asking for a waiver of state policy.
we're not authorized to do.
No, but if you look at the procedure, it takes it up to the state board.
You know what we should do to bring, because this is information discussion, I want to go back and see if we can find any evidence of this ever actually being used.
yeah.
Good luck.
Well, yeah, right, I know, because but my suspicion is, I mean, that this has never actually been leveraged in any contemporary way. And if I'm looking at this actual form, which should be in the office of the superintendent somewhere, there's no routing, I mean, this whole, if the board decides to maintain this, I'll have to work on this complete regulatory overhaul with you, Mr. Blivis, but I'm trying to think, like, is the view worth the climb? Like, has this ever been
Have you been used? Yeah.
done? And in it, I will just be, that I'm cautious about creating what could be perceived as a loophole.
Yes, yeah.
To get around, and I feel like the integrity of following policy has been so strong here.
Yeah.
This is an odd
But
thing.
it says,
Think of a
its
situation.
policies meet, it's not saying state.
policy.
It says
It's
it's
not
ours.
enough clarity in here for us to even piece together.
The reference to the states is really
The
in,
last line.
is really in the regulation, because
Yeah.
we could, I mean, I don't know what the circumstance would be, but we could request a waiver of, maybe it's a waiver of a state board curriculum requirement, so we can,
But that wouldn't be through this board
Right.
making its
no,
policy.
no, but the
Yeah.
regulation speaks to the waiver of a state board policy and it going through the board to the state board.
Yeah, there's a.
You're right, I mean, it's the state board's decision about whether to grant or waive a policy or not. That's not up to our board, but it goes through our board, and if you look at the regulation, it does speak to that.
So now that you've mentioned policy 114, I actually think that it could live very nicely in that one, in my opinion, because it talks about policy suspension, policy interpretation, policy
Oh, well, then
implementation.
that actually does
It
make.
could live in governance as well, because if it does speak to the state
We
board,
just need to decide what makes
So
the
if
most
somebody were
sense.
looking for, what do I need to do, because the policies aren't quite fitting my issues, and 114 seems to be like, that's where someone would go to look for it.
I mean, that's,
Do you know what I'm
its
trying to
title is
like-
policy development,
Yeah.
114.
I have to imagine there was just a very different context.
Yeah, like this is just not, we're
there's a story, for sure.
There's
we're so
story.
far away from it at
Can I
this
just
point that it may.
jump in? I'm looking at COMA right now, and so I'm thinking that it possibly came about for the waiver of like the attendance. So
180 day.
that's a waiver of, let's see,
And we do have a regulation on attendance waivers.
and the waiver of the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment graduation requirements that parents can apply for in the
have in our graduation
approve
policy.
or deny.
This may be.
So that might be
the time.
But it's still connected to the MSDE.
Right.
It's sort of, we have to waive our policy in order to request a waiver. We're sort of, if you're asking for MSDE to give you a waiver, you're also asking for a waiver of your own policy. But the two topics you mentioned, attendance, I would add emergency closure, 180-day requirement, and you said curriculum or graduation requirements.
Yeah.
Our existing policies speak to a waiver and appeal process, correct? I believe. That's why I go back to my original point. I wonder if this was like a required interim measure for submitting for an MSDE waiver versus some isolated board-only waiver. Does that make sense, right?
This was to address something specific at the time.
What is the process for making a request to MSDE, and maybe it required local boards submitting to waive their own policy to then,
That
wondering.
starts to make sense. That I know Garrett County and one other just asked the state board if they could use MLK Day as a school day, and that was denied. So wondering if they had to, like some sort of.
There is a state prohibition on virtual charter schools, and if you recall, on the Eastern Shore, they were moving in the direction of a virtual charter school. I forget which system.
had one.
But then it had to go away. But maybe
you could request a waiver.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is like, maybe they had a local policy that supported the existence of it. The state says you can't do that, and so they are requesting. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to dig into this.
So I guess we could just put a pin in this for now and say we're gonna bring it back to a future policy meeting.
Align with whichever 100 series policy we want to align it to.
And then maybe if there's
We
some.
can do some digging to find out.
If it's ever been used or applied.
Yeah, if it's ever been used, but I think the other piece that I'm wondering about is, of the last 10 years that I've been involved with policy directly, any of those MSDE waivers have their own process. Like, we don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't require a local board to waive its policy in order to submit it. It's sort of not, it's not handled that way. So I'd like also sort of reach out to the chief of staff at MSDE and say, are you familiar?
Does this make any sense to you?
He's not gonna know either,
The
but-
state board's website has all kinds of decisions, and I'm fairly certain I've seen a waivers section. So there may be.
Right. Julie's saying we've never used this other than for inclement weather. And she said the last time, she said, I've been in the office since 2014, I've never seen this before.
Yeah, as I say, Brad wasn't elected until 2010, so you can't even ask.
It probably addressed a problem at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Jack Dale or Linda Berge.
So what we will do work on our end that needs to be done with doing, just to understand more of the context.
Understand it.
And figure out where it should live.
We will make a recommendation to decommission it when it is brought back for information, discussion, action. And we will make a recommendation for which policy it should be folded into, and you'll know which one because we're gonna put them all together at the same agenda.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just like we're doing with 510, we'll do the same thing with 515.
Why we do this, right? Makes sense. Love it.
So that brings us to policy, or to item 108, which is upcoming policy meetings. Our next meeting is on February 25th, 2026. The tentative agenda is policy 309, discrimination and harassment, policy 437, bullying, harassment, intimidation, policy 503, character education, policy 506, evening high school. Those four are all information, discussion, action items. Policy 508, special education. Policy 511, assessments. And policy 513, distribution of informational materials, are all information discussion items. So that is our agenda. Like I said, it's robust, but we got through all of the 5 that we had today, and we have about a half an hour left. I can tell you that, the hope is that 309 and 407, or 437, because we discussed them today, will be a relatively quick review. I can tell you that the recommendation on 503 is going to be decommission.
What is 503 again?
That's the character education.
Yes.
We don't do that education anymore. We do something different. So we're recommending that that be just decommissioned, and that's it.
Some schools, I believe, might still have, but that's not going to infringe on the school's ability, so.
It's the system, it's whether you want to have this character education curriculum, and we don't do that anymore. It's now more of a social emotional learning curriculum, which, by the way, you have a curriculum policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it lives.
Evening high school will be another one that we have information, discussion, action on. It's possible that we'll be recommending decommission of that too, and we'll get into something else the way, but we're not there yet. And then the last three, are just discussion, and we'll have good, robust conversation that will guide the revisions that will come back to the policy committee at a later meeting. So for Jeannie, for your benefit, because I've already talked to Ray a little bit about this, the roadmap that we prepared last year for the 500 series, the policy committee hopefully will complete its review of all of the 500 series policies by the June 26th meeting, whatever that date is. So we will meet our mandate to have this series completed. The board will not be done with the 500 series, but you all will. At a meeting coming up, probably April, I'll have a roadmap for the 100 series, and that'll be an opportunity for you all to say, you know what, I like the roadmap, or you know what, I want to see policy 100 be the very first one, so make sure it's in August and not kicked until December. So you'll get a look at what the future will hold for you.
And I think it's also, always like to put the caveat that with the legislative session,
Change.
there's always the possibility that we would be directed to do something, I hope not by July 1, but anything's possible.
It is, and then there's always the possibility that our Supreme Court makes a decision that requires us to come back and take
Yeah,
another
that's
look
the
at a
other-
policy we
right.
just finished revising.
Unknowns.
Really?
It's
Yeah, the unknowns.
entirely possible.
Newspaper articles?
I mean, I just, for the board's knowledge, so there's every Tuesday, I attend a legislative briefing meeting. Every Tuesday morning, we go through all the bills that are being discussed and going to committee. And so if there's anything that's sort of weird, I try to track all that, and I will farm them out. We have different contexts. Mr. Blivis has his general counsel but we'll sort of say, hey, we're watching this one, particularly ones that are hot topics. Like we were monitoring the telehealth for quite a while, so we were really staged and prepared to do that because we had been watching it throughout session, and we'll still do that. A lot of them die. There's thousands of bills. Not all of them get out of committee. But if we see one that's gaining traction and might have either fiscal implications or policy implications, we keep a really close eye on those.
So when you say we, who do you?
Well, we, as a collective, so there are folks like me from across the state. Every school system has a different version of me. Not all are the chief of staff, if you will. But we work with PZAM. Yeah, PZAM coordinates the call because they're in Annapolis, and so a lot of it is so that they're building their positions. They take positions on bills, and so there's coordination with MABE and PZAM.
And Mako.
And Mako, sort of, and sometimes we differ, but it's helpful, and we're tracking all of the bills and sort of keeping an eye on one. Of course, I keep a particular close eye on ones that are by our own delegation, and sort of looking at those, so.
And we also have internal mechanisms, so the Office of Legislative Affairs will send to us fiscal note requests.
Yes.
And they give us a very short turnaround time.
We got 16 last week.
Yeah, and we had 4 days
And we
to
had 4 days to
return
do
them.
it.
It's,
They kept saying this was gonna be a year where there weren't many bills introduced. Like, who was, because it's an election year? Like, what were they thinking?
Who said that?
you have
The legislators.
you have the fiscal notes, that's done through through Heather Clayball's team. Dr. Shergo does what she does. I also track legislation with the start of each legislative session. I go through and I use the Maryland General Assembly's update site, and you can tag certain legislation. You get a daily report on them.
Yeah.
I have about 30 that I've got tagged and tracked.
And I don't think, now that MABE has gone to Engagify, you may have to be able to log in. Yeah, it's not what they thought it was.
If you want to use Maeve's version, yes.
Yes.
I just do it directly.
That's new. This is new for MABE, so, and they've beefed up their staff. They now have a former Department of Education person working.
I met her virtually last week at a legal meeting of LEA attorneys. And they presented on the legislative updates.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that have also budget implications, you know, and some favorable, some not. I'm just looking here. One, you know, there's been one that's actually been proposed around having income eligibility for CCR, right? Whereas right now, you know, so there's some things that could be very favorable, that won't necessarily change policy, but change budget, so we stay actively with this.
Oh, I know, every time I would check with, you know, somebody like they already knew, Paul, Heather, it's like, wow, and we don't have any legislative person like, most,
We
like
don't have a
Applicants.
dedicated legislative person.
Right. Sometimes it works with their board, sometimes with their more superintendent side, as you all well know. There is one bill that I would like to talk to you about.
Okay.
Because Mary Pat Fannin made reference to it. And I said something to Dr. Dyson, she's not me, I'm a Mary Pat. So I'd like to.
Okay, sure,
talk
absolutely.
afterwards about it.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that have policy intersections are ones that involve reporting requirements. Sometimes we have to go, and that's some ends up in reg more than anything, things that require us to report information in certain ways, but there are ones that have legitimate fiscal notes.
So with that, I think
We shall adjourn today at 11:05. Wonderful job, everybody.
Yeah.
And great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.